Hello, you wonderful people, and welcome to another episode of Not Too Comic Book. This being a show where I talk about TV shows that are adaptations of comic books. For today's episode, I'm going to talk about Season 2 of Iron Fist. So like always with these type of things, I will start off non-spoilerish, but then eventually I will get into spoilers. So first of all, my general thoughts about everything without going too much into spoilers. I really liked Season 2. I think if you had, I know I'm in the minority here, but I really liked Season 1. I think any complaints you might have had about Season 1, I feel like they fixed in Season 2. That's just kind of my opinion, so kind of take it, with a grain of salt. But in my general opinion, I think it is better too. I think they do a lot of interesting things this season. This season, obviously, I'll break down a lot more in my spoiler review of it. But for first and foremost, I just want to kind of get that out of the way. So I feel like the story took a lot of interesting turns I didn't necessarily see coming. A lot of stuff went down this season. Not necessarily the way I was kind of assuming it would just be from the trailers because I did my thoughts and theories. So in general, it's a great time. If you have not seen it, I recommend you see it because I'm sure, like I said, I'm sure people has reservations because they didn't really like Season 1. But I recommend you watch Season 2 because I think it's better in my opinion. So that's just going to be the stop then and there. After this point, I will be going into spoilers. Do know this will be me covering the entire season. So if you have not seen all of Season 2 of Iron Fist, do not listen to this because it will spoil it for you. So if you want to, you can go back and watch all of Season 2, come back and listen to this, but don't feel obligated, to do that. So like I said, at this point in time, entering spoiler territory now. It was a crazy great season. So many different things I need to talk about and bring up. First and foremost, Danny's progression in this story. I was so curious how they were going to handle it because obviously this is taking place post. I always feel like I'm using the word post wrong. This is always taking place after Season 2 of Luke Cage. Well, when he popped up there, he was a lot more centered. I thought was kind of interesting. But maybe that's just because at that point, Danny because it seems like even at Danny, it's like I said, every time we see Danny, he's very different. Who Danny was in Season 1 of Iron Fist is different to who he was in Defenders and who he was in Season 2 of Luke Cage. I feel like, and I think that's the beauty of his character. I feel like amongst anyone's character, amongst this MCU stuff on Netflix, I feel like he's been the most that you kind of got to see his character change into that, which I think fits perfectly for him because that's Danny's whole thing. Amongst anyone, which a lot of the superheroes amongst this situation have struggled the most to figure out who they are, and I feel like Danny struggled the hardest and the longest about it, just because the duties of having the Iron Fist and Iron Fist being all there is to him and who he is without it. And I just like his progression because obviously Luke Cage Season 2 showed a different side of him. He seemed like he was more cool, calm, and collected. He's not the angry person that he was in Season 1, which we find out technically in this season he technically is because all the times he punches. Because it was something I immediately noticed, but I didn't really notice it until Danny pointed it out. I was like, oh yeah, he is using the Iron Fist a lot more. And because for him, it's there's a certain power to it. Because it's hard to say where the dragon inside of the heart of the dragon begins and you end, because it all becomes kind of tangled up as one being. And so you kind of get swept away by all that rage, in particular Danny. So maybe a lot of what we saw in Season 1, his anger, maybe that was his anger, but maybe on some level it was the Iron Fist too. But it was something he did kind of pop it out way more this season than I feel like he did one. Maybe if you count it up, it balances out, but I just feel like it popped up so much more and a lot quicker during the season. I mean, to be fair, it was wasn't until Episode 2 did he actually use the Iron Fist for the first time, I think. No, he used it in Season 1, the first episode of Season 1, didn't he? I don't remember. But nevertheless, I did like the progression of his story. Because for him, Danny's always trying to find a different way. It's kind of interesting because that's something that each of the heroes has kind of struggled with the most is not killing somebody. Matt's always kind of going that path. Jessica's unfortunately kind of going that path, sadly, and you see what it's done to her, but you see Luke and Danny have tried to avoid going down that path too. Just because once you go down that path, there's no changing it, so for Danny, they're trying to keep that up, especially with the whole Davos situation. And to me, that's the craziest thing about I'll get into that, the whole Davos and Joy situation. It's kind of they blame Danny for so much because it's Davos is blaming him for Kunlun, but it's what do you expect? Because at the same time, and it's something Misty kind of like brings up this season. It's like, you can't save everyone. And it's like, Danny did what he thought was right, you know, and he kind of gets blamed for it. Joy blames him. And because I was wondering the entire time, it's like, you're really blaming him for like all the lies that were kept about Harold, but it's like they were trying to protect you, but it's like, oh, I didn't need your protection. And it's just lies upon lies, which kind of, it's kind of interesting because even from the very beginning of the season, when Joy first pops up, she's actually a little hesitant because she didn't want to do it to Danny, because she actually, you know, like him saying what he's saying, like, you know, take care of yourself, and like, you know, he was actually checking in on her. It made her hesitant because it's like, oh yeah, here we are lying and conspiring behind his back, which is so funny and ironic considering she called Ward and Danny out for it later on. It's like, you were literally doing the same thing you're complaining about them doing. Do you not see the hypocrisy behind it? But it's kind of interesting because that's something Danny, Davos, and Joy have so much of in this season, and it's something I think Ward had a lot of in season 1, but it kind of disappeared. And I think Colleen kind of had it too, but it kind of disappeared as well. Is that anger? Like, that's what fuels them all. Davos, Danny, and Joy in all of this is that they were angry at each other about everything. You know, Davos's case is like, oh yeah, his dad stopped the fight, wasn't it? It's like Hung and Thunderer are the same person, or those are two different people, right? That's so sad about the situation with his mom too. Like, Davos's mom is kind of being like, I would have preferred being buried than having him. Like, jeez, like no wonder Davos has such a damn complex about being the Iron Fist, because it's like he was bred to be one. He was punished and pushed through such harsh training, but it seems like his mom loved him and cared for him. It's just they didn't have that relationship where they could say what they needed to say, and it's just like so much was left unsaid. And I guess that's even more reason why he hates Danny, because it's like, because you weren't there to protect Kunlun, I wasn't there. Like, none of this would have happened if I was the Iron Fist. Which is interesting, like kind of talking about the whole Davos situation. Once again, I'm not that familiar with comic books, but if I'm remembering correctly, Davos's character in Ultimate Spider-Man, which I talk about, like the cartoon, is my only really introduction to both, like, a lot of people in that show, but in particular referencing, you know, Luke Cage / Power Man, you know, and, Danny / Iron Fist. Like, that was kind of my first introduction to them, like I said, amongst other people. But since we're talking about this whole MCU TV show thing right now, these two characters are pertinent in that conversation. So, but if I remember correctly, there was a Kunlun episode earlier in Spider-Man. It might have been season 1 or season 2, where Peter joins Danny when he goes there, and there's a dude he fights who wants to be the Iron Fist or something like that. I think that's Davos in a cartoon, isn't it? That might not be him, because I don't know what his situation is like all across the board, because it was a while ago, so I don't remember the storyline. Like, I don't know if they were always friends / brothers. Like, they might have always been like that, but eventually became rivals. Like, you know, like with MCU stuff like this, they always kind of take their own interpretation. They kind of do their own thing with it anyway, so. But nevertheless, but it's like his mom is gone now, so it's kind of like, it's all that he had. His home, along with his mom, who he never was able to reconcile with, is gone. But it's also at the same time, it's like, you and Danny, you hate him so much, but you have so much common ground too. Like, you lost everything, so did Danny. Danny lost so much too. And it's so interesting because, like, Davos calls Danny out for wanting the Iron Fist to fill some void in his heart, but it's like Davos is doing the same thing because he was pushed to be this person his entire life, and he's trying to complete this destiny. He's trying to fill this hole in his heart with this destiny that he feels like he was destined to have. It's kind of interesting because, like, that fight too, like, we saw the scenery change, like time of day and stuff. That fight went on for a long time. We never got to see it, but it is kind of like the way they talk about it is like, oh, you've made it all the way here. So it was basically like a tournament, because by the time it gets to Davos and Danny's fight, you can see their faces are already bruised up from previous fights. So, but having to go against the man that you once called a brother, and that fight got brutal and bloody, and it's like no one leaves until the other person dies or yields. So it does beg the question, why was the fight called? Because neither one wanted to yield, but Thunderer was like, yo, Danny's the one that gets to be the Iron Fist. But it's like, and it's something Danny brings up later on, is it because he wanted to spare your pride, or was it because he knew what you were capable of? And because what makes it hurt even more, because not only was it your brother, it was also the man who's an outsider, which is interesting considering, like, you take all this and combine it with Davos in season 1 when he's like, oh man, you're the Iron Fist. Oh, you're so great. I'm there to help you after your challenge with Shao. And it's like the fact of the matter is his hate for Danny ran so damn deep. Maybe that's what his whole friendship was based around too. Well, not like later after that challenge and stuff like that, after the fight for the Iron Fist, and then like the challenging of Shao. Maybe that was enough to make him go, maybe I'll stick by Danny's side. That even though I can't be the Iron Fist, maybe I can subsequently point him in the right way. Like if I can't be the Iron Fist, at least I'll be beside the Iron Fist. But I think maybe on some level, on some point, maybe he wanted things to be this way because he always wanted the Iron Fist for himself, which is like, you can't help but assume he's been plotting and think about it the entire time because he's been screaming at it like, I deserve the Iron Fist. Danny doesn't. And even Danny later on is like, hell, I'll tell you, I don't deserve the Iron Fist, but you sure as hell don't. It's crazy because I wasn't expecting it. Davos went full on Punisher this season, killing all the bad guys without hesitation. That was crazy. I didn't expect that coming out. But I also love the fact is that he's so blinded when they're thinking like, oh, he's on the right path and everything, and he gets so uppity and pissed when he finds out people think he's a killer. It's like, you're killing a lot of people. You even had Chin be like, yo, these guys aren't even triad. It's like, whatever, they're just trying to get high or whatever, but he still like punches one dude and steps on another dude's neck and killing him. It's like, holy crap. It's kind of interesting too. I really like Chin because Chin was just kind of the guy like, no, don't kill me. I'll serve you. I'll help you kill everyone. I think Chin is the Turk of Iron Fist. Interesting enough, sadly, he ended up dying, which we did see Turk pop up this season. I love that too. It's like, I love that he's kind of like the little background jokey character that everyone goes to. He's like the only consistent character besides Claire across all the shows. So I thought that was kind of a nice touch. That Ward and Mary ended up buying guns for him, and then Ward's giving him advice on how to, what was it? Think about sunsets and stuff for his swing, his golf swing and stuff like that. I thought that was kind of interesting. But getting back to Davos, it's like his need to like rule with the Iron Fist, literally, in a sense of like, he was trying to fix the world, but he was kind of going about it the wrong way. And that's the thing, and I think to people's credit, that's always the thing about a good villain. They think they're the good guy, like, oh, I'm the one that's going to bring balance because you have all the like, I thought the triad, I was curious like how much of a role the triad thing would play. It kind of started everything off, which is interesting considering like Davos acted like he's a good guy, but it's like, you killed and hurt so many people get to where you are. Let's not forget you made Mr. Yang have a stroke so that you can make sure you got the body later on, and you're up here trying to stop all the criminals. It's like literally a war was about to stop, but that war stopping would have meant you wouldn't be able to get what you want. So it's like, oh, now you want to be the hero and everything. No matter what you want to blame Danny for, Danny's never been a hypocrite, is what kind of my thought process was. And that's the same thing kind of Joy ends up getting on him about later on too, because it's like, him have such a high ego about himself like that, like he's some great savior. Like that poor Mr. Yip, it's like Mr. Yip was like, oh, I don't want to pick a side. He's like, well, you want to pick a side? Oh, you're with the Golden Tigers. He's like, I've never been with the Golden Tigers. It's like, no, he was kind of being extorted and beat up for. He just didn't want to be involved in anything. He's like, no, I know you're a good man. He's like, I just don't, but you were so caught up in your own thought because it's like, oh, if you're not with me, you're with the enemy, which is kind of interesting. Kind of, if I had to make a comparison, it's kind of like the whole one crew situation in the 100. You're not one crew, you're an enemy in one crew. It's kind of that mentality. Poor Rhino got his throat slit, which Rhino was kind of an asshole, but he was kind of backing down. That dude Crank is the biggest asshole because he's the one that slit his throat. He's the one that freaking stabbed BB. I was like, no, because I thought the way they were setting it up, I was like, remember that student Colleen had last season? Like I said, I brought up in a video, I was like, whatever happened to all those students who were under Bakudo, like whatever happened, and we never really ever cut back to that. But I was thinking like he was going to be the new that one for Colleen, but it's like he dies later. I was like, oh man, that sucks, BB. Especially because the bond him and Colleen had, especially considering he pulled out a gun on her the first, later on after the setup and everything. But it's like, yeah, they grew close, and I was like, oh man, that could be, yeah, she's going to train him later on. But it's like, nah, Crank killed him, and he's so happy about it and everything. It's like, that sucks, dude. Also, there was that line from Chin I like. I'm kind of going back to Chin. What was it? The fact is, Davo, he was like, oh, we could go. He's like trying to talk casually. Davo's like, oh man, after all these killing, man, we should go get something to eat. He's like, I don't eat meat. Killing animals for whatever is disgusting or whatever. He doesn't eat meat. And then like you have Chin being like, you're a vegetarian killer. It's like, okay, it's just kind of like because even I had to pause and call it out. I was like, really? You're talking about how disgusting killing animals are and and you're up here killing people like it's nothing. Okay, sure. Well, see where how you got your priorities straight. It's also interesting too. I didn't realize it was such a big ritual, kind of going to it, like the whole stealing the Iron Fist thing. I was wondering about that because I couldn't remember from the trailers if I saw him have the Iron Fist while Davos had it. And it's like, I think he has a specific name too, Davos, like where as he is. I don't remember what it is exactly. I could have sworn like I came across it on the internet at one point in time, I think, but I don't remember. But I thought that's kind of pretty neat, like having to take the heart of the dragon from another Iron Fist, hence the body, some other ingredients, the blood of a current, the Iron Fist you're trying to take the power from, and then getting like inked on your body with like ink made from all of that, and he, instead of a dragon, he gets a serpent, which I guess in a sense you can almost think of him like as a serpent in the Garden of Eden. I guess might be kind of what they're aiming for in that regard. Maybe not. Maybe that's just me thinking too much about it. But that definitely had to suck for Danny because for and it's one of those things, and it's kind of going back to what I was talking about, the growth of Danny. The fact of the matter is he was always so jumping forward. Like no matter what anyone tell him, it's like stop to think. He would never stop to think. He'd always push forward against everyone's advice, which screws him over multiple ways because his hot-headedness. He ended up ruining a police thing. Because the moment we saw those people moving around, it didn't even cross my mind to think those were cops. I was like, no, Miss Yang, she's got to set the whole thing up. But the way things were kind of going down, I was like, oh, maybe not. Because the thing is, she didn't let anyone know that Mr. Yang had a stroke. Granted, he wasn't dead at the time, but his condition got worse. And he never popped up later on, so I can only assume he ended up dying. Because I think she kind of referenced it in the sense of kind of like a past tense thing when it comes to her husband. So, other things, popping up, the fact is Colleen stopped being a teacher, and it's kind of interesting because it seems like basically after the events of Defenders, she stopped picking up her sword, which is interesting. When you look back on Luke Cage season 2, she didn't have her sword at all, so it's kind of interesting that they do think about that stuff like that, the continuity of it, because for her, she felt like, the art of Bushido, you should only pick up your sword if you're willing to use it, like you should only draw your sword if you're willing to use it, and she feels like if she carries her sword around, she would use it. Turns out it wasn't even Bakuto that really taught her that. It was actually her grandfather. It actually kind of caught me by surprise that the fact is that her whole family thing ended up being more of a background thing than it was like a more for. It played into the plot, but I thought it was going to be a bigger part of the plot. Because first and foremost, this season being shorter kind of caught me off guard. I was like, because the way things are heating up, I was like, wait, the way they got this sounded, it sounded like 10 episodes is going to be the end, and it totally was. Most of these seasons end up being 13 episodes with the exception of the Defenders, so I guess that's okay, but it just kind of caught me off guard that they only went 10. It seemed like the story was kind of moving faster in certain regards. I was like, oh, is something else going to pop up? Because I know a lot of people have their, problem with a lot of the seasons, because they're like, yeah, some of the seasons of these kind of go a little too long, because it's like, yeah, just a couple episodes too long. So I wonder, did that make a change in many people's minds? It's like, oh no, let's make this season a little bit shorter, but we still told the story we needed to tell. So, but because you had her trying to be away from all this thing, kind of let Danny do his own thing, but it's like, that's his path, that's not my path. But she kind of gets dragged back into it when Danny wants her to train him, and it's like, it comes off a little selfish, but at the same time, it's like, there's so much happening, and he needs to get back into fighting shape if he wants to stop Davos from doing what he's doing and kill all those people. And it kind of hurts for Colleen, because it's like, you're forcing me, like kind of forcing my hand in this situation. Because of this, I can't be the person you need me to be. Like during the situation, I need to cut off all my feelings. Like I have to be your sensei and nothing more. Like what's happening between us, Because it was something I was literally about to say. I was like, oh man, things are actually good between them. Yeah, they got their complications, but it's like, oh, maybe someone will walk out of this situation with a good love life. I mean, to be fair, Jessica currently is the only one with a good love life right now, because everyone else's love life is kind of shit. It turns out Danny's and Colleen's is kind of going through their own struggle right now too, but still. A lot of things let's see where I want to go with this. Well, let's talk about Joy and Ward. Now, Ward surprised me a lot in this season. Like, obviously, the bond between him and Danny caught me off guard. Like, even at one point in time, referring to Danny, he's like, yeah, I did that to my brother Danny. I'm like, what? Look at you. Like, it's crazy. The minute you hated Danny so much in season 1, and now it's like, look where you are now. Like, after everything that's happened, he's kind of like a brother to you. Especially when him and Danny had that heart-to-heart about saying what you need to say. Because it's like, for him, it's like, my mom, the last her words to me were, I love you. I never got a chance to say I love you too, and he held on to those words for so long. That's what got him through all the beatings in Kunlun, was that it kind of got him to where he is. because it's like you have to make sure, because that's why when everything happened to him, why he didn't want to back down, why he didn't want to die, is because he knew that if he died, he would have died without saying what he needed to say to the people who he loved and cared about. And that includes Ward, and Ward being like, okay, after the lone pause. So is this the part where I say the L word? And they're both laughing and stuff. It's kind of interesting because it's not only his relationship with Joy he's working on, it's also his relationship with Danny. I'm surprised it never circled back and became more of a thing, but there's the whole thing with the side job that Danny was working, like, because he was trying to not be like, oh, the rich boy, he never had to work for anything in his life, considering everything he's kind of been through. It's like, okay, shut up about that. But for Danny, it's like he wanted to show people that, and I think it wasn't just for other people, it was for himself to show that he could, live on his own, work a job. He didn't need his billions to kind of like, be the rich boy he is to handle a lot of things, kind of a little personal responsibility, a little growth, see who he was without it, but he does realize that no matter what, that part of him, the whole brand, name and position and power comes with it. It didn't come up too much in the show, but I think that's also the aspect. I mean, it comes up a little bit here and there with some of the stuff they have to dive into, but it's like, brand industry, of course it wouldn't play a big role because like the reason why it played such a big role in season 1 was because the hand was behind it. Then there's also the whole Harold situation, so... Hey, since we are talking about that ended up being another reason why Joy was super pissed at Ward, because it's like, oh, you took away my chance to be with our dad, Like, no matter how shitty he was still our dad. But Ward's like, you don't remember him the way I do. All the bruises, all the stuff I went through, like, there's multiple times he wanted to tell Joy the truth, but she was like, the fact of the matter is, like, if you had said something back, then maybe things would. But it's just kind of like Ward is trying to make amends. But I guess for her biggest issue is the fact is, because he's trying to make amends, he's making amends for himself. He's focusing on him, like, on what he wants, what he should do, rather than being focused on what the other person wants, putting their wants and needs above his own, because he wants, it's like, no, I want you to forgive me. Like, it's, like I said, it's all about him type of thing. The whole thing with him and Bethany, her being the doctor to help Danny this season and everything, turning out she gets pregnant later on. Didn't see that coming. Because it almost seemed like there was something good happening between them, but Ward isn't in a position to really be dating anyone because their family is all kinds of messed up. Joyce tried to kill him this season. To be fair, Ward tried to kill him last season, so it's kind of like, oh, what's nothing between siblings, So, but Joy did try to bring it back. She says it was all for self-survival, but I think, and she even admitted it later on, I thought it was kind of incredible. The reason why she aimed it at Danny, all her hate and rage, is honestly because she couldn't bring herself to aim it at Ward because she still loves him. That's her brother. Like, there's still that familial bond. Like, Danny's someone she cares about, but he doesn't have the family ties like Ward does. And her dad's not around for her to kind of vent her anger towards. So Danny was just kind of the easy subject because she couldn't bring herself to do it to anybody else, She just needed an excuse to aim it at him like that. You could always tell, like I said, like, things weren't 100% easy for her when it came to Danny. Davos, it's not like I feel like he didn't really even give it a chance. He didn't even try, I mean, he tried, but it was kind of like, yeah, give me the Iron Fist. Gimme. It's like, he tries to pretend like it's about other stuff, but at the end of the day, it's all about you, your own self, grandiose ego, Some surprises. For one, freaking Mary, played by Alice Eve. I think I saw that, but I completely forgot she was in this until I saw it. I was like, oh my god, Alice Eve. I was like, that's so dope. I was like, when she first popped up, I had to listen to her. I was like, is she doing an American accent? It's like, yeah, she totally is, which is so cool. Which is interesting and funny when you actually break it down and think about it, because there's quite a few actors like Finn Jones, who plays Danny. He's British. And so is Alice Eve, as well as Jessica Henwick. It's just kind of interesting. That really shocked me because I think I knew about the Finn Jones situation, maybe, but it wasn't too much later on because I think it wasn't until I saw an interview with Jessica Henwick that I was like, oh, you have an accent. And then looked at it, I was like, yeah, she's totally British. I was like, that's so cool that there's so many Brits running around. I think I let it slip my mind that Charlie Cox, Matt Murdock, Daredevil is British as well, so it's kind of funny to me. But nevertheless, her whole situation, and I was like, from the very beginning, I kind of had a feeling, I was like, oh yeah, it's that dissociative personality disorder. Once again, it's something I always bring up when that situation comes up. I I'm sure there's a medical reason for it. I don't know why they went from multiple personality disorder to dissociative. I know dissociative is probably the more the more appropriate term, meaning it's a lot more befitting the condition than multiple personality, I guess, would be. I kind of had a feeling the moment the sticky notes popped up and stuff like that, and she getting bothered by it, I was like, she has another personality, doesn't she? Which is kind of slipping in and out, so that didn't catch me by surprise. What I was wondering what her whole deal would be. Turns out she's freaking special forces. I thought that was kind of crazy. She has one side of her Mary, which is interesting when you actually think about it. She was not Mary a lot of the season. She was more so Walker, which also makes me kind of feel like I have a hard time determining which side of her is the real her. I guess Mary is the real side of her, but then like she becomes Walker when the time comes. No, Alice is the alter. Not Alice. Calling her by her real name. Mary's the alter. Like I get like that kind of got me confused. But I think Walker's the real her, and Mary was the alter. It's kind of interesting because I figured like some of her triggers were. It was like the water, the lights, and stuff like that. And it also seemed like there's an emotional trigger because the moment Danny started screaming, she put in silencing headphones or whatever so she wouldn't hear it because she didn't want that to kind of trigger Mary. But I also like the twist later on. It's not something we get a lot of, but it turns out there's actually a third. I thought it would have been interesting if we ended up finding out that it actually was Mary who killed all those people when they escaped, because Mary thanked, Walker for it, but it's like Walker's like, yeah, but I never did that, which is interesting because to me it's like, well, why would Mary pretend to be that bloody and then make a thank like that, thanks like that? But the thing is, like, we saw Mary; she's very honest and sweet, so it's kind of interesting. We never got to meet them, but still, I'm sure because it just seemed like basically what the terrible crap she was going through, plus it was raining at the time, like her need to survive is what triggered like the dissociative disorder. So, because I was wondering, because the fact that she's special forces and stuff like that made me go like, does this have anything to do with Samson, his whole thing in Jessica Jones? Like, which I think all that's kind of been wrapped up, so I don't think there's even any remnants of that left, because that was definitely like dealt with, especially the last remnants of it in season 2 of Jessica Jones. So I was wondering if it had something to do with that, because a lot of her files were redacted, but probably not. It does seem, I wonder if she's someone from the comic books, because you never know with these type of things. Like, more often than not, if there's a character popping up, I'm like, they're from the comic books. But at the same time, it's like, well, no, it could have easily just been a character they made up. I kind of get the feeling that's a comic book character, which is interesting. Like, just a character with dissociative personality disorder. I mean, she's very highly skilled, which is so badass to see Alice Eve going on badass like that. It's so cool. Which is kind of crazy to think about. She has like a much crazier side inside of her that we just never got to see this season. I think that's kind of a nice little tease. Like, we know it exists, we just never got to see it. The last thing you want is to see it, so that's kind of an interesting thing. I mean, because they don't never know about each other's time, because they lose time when someone switches over. So that means in that time frame between that incident when she was held in that prison, and when she escaped till now, which she had talked about, she never really asked questions about it too much because she just assumed Mary got help, and Mary just assumed Walker handled that whole situation. So it's like, who knows, at any point in time in all of that time, they could have switched over to the other because they don't know what the trigger is for the other. So what's also interesting too is her doctor was Dr. Edmund, who was the dude looking after Danny in season 1. He was also the one that took care of Ward when Harold kind of set that whole situation up. So I thought that was kind of pretty nice. It was just like a one-off episode thing. You know who I was really happy to see kind of pop up this season, I thought was pretty neat, was Misty. And I love that she was in a much bigger arc this season. Because obviously season 2 of Luke Cage, like Danny and Colleen only popped up for one episode. Misty was concurrent throughout this season. Which for one, it's like, her being a big help anyway in the investigation. It helps to have a cop on your side to kind of get around a lot of red tape and stuff like that. But also, it's like, we're building up that old Daughters of the Dragon thing. Side note, I'd completely forgotten all the times I brought it up, that conversation about Daughters of the Dragons. I completely forgot that's what Colleen called herself last season. It wasn't until I saw the recap at the beginning, I was like, all right, that's what she called herself back then in season 1. I mean, it's been a while since I've seen season 1. The last time I watched it was August of last year. Right, because I ended up rewatching it prior to Defenders coming out, so along with everything else at the time. But nevertheless, I really liked her showing up, and like especially they built the, because I was like, we got little bits of her and Colleen, and this season we really drive that relationship going forward. And I love that conversation between them being like, Colleen's like, yeah, you're kind of like the only healthy relationship I have. And then Misty's like, yeah, you're saying for me, which is like, yeah, you two don't really have any friends out of this situation. And the superpowered men in your life kind of make things complicated. I mean, granted, Misty's relationship with Luke is very different from Colleen and Danny's relationship, but still the point stands. So I just like the bond that they create, the kind of jokes between each other, having each other's back, because Colleen was there for Misty when she was down, and now Misty's trying to be there for Colleen and everything that she does, trying to help her figure out what she wants to do with her life, make her understand, like, she ends up talking about it later on. The reason why she stopped teaching wasn't because she was afraid. It was because she didn't want to be responsible for marching more people towards their death. Because it'd be fair, like, she taught all those people and went straight into Bakuto's hand. Because for her, it's like, how can I trust, myself? Because I'm a terrible judge of character, which Misty kind of alludes, she kind of brings that up. She's like, oh, I know good people who went bad and some bad people who went good. I'm curious about who's that in particular, because I know with the good person going bad is Scarf. Because she knows all about that situation, because she had her relationship with Scarf about a man that she trusted, and she couldn't really see him for who he really, didn't really bring it up, but I thought it was kind of a nice little subtle text kind of conversation about it. Because she brings it up later that she didn't like the man Luke is turning into, but I'm wondering, does he kind of fit in that category of a good man kind of going bad, or does he kind of fit in that more category of a bad man going good? Because she always had a problem with Luke, obviously, when they first met back in season 1, but still, Love that she's obviously utilizing that arm the hell out of it. Like I said, she popped up a lot of this season, like over half the season, which I really appreciate. She ended up bringing something up at the end of the season, talking about it getting upgraded. Kind of get it all blinged out. Like, if I remember, maybe I'm 100% wrong. I can't remember. Like, I've literally fairly recently looked at a picture of her and Colleen from the comic books. Is her arm white? Or at the very least, I think it's a lot sleeker designed than it is in the TV show. Like, it's a lot more blackish, but I feel like maybe it's not as just, I don't know. I feel like it looks sleeker in the comic books. At least the one iteration of them I saw. Like, the version of them I probably saw was probably like a more recent adaptation. I mean, sure, they're probably characters that have gone through many different design changes. Different artists have gotten their hands on them. So, her and Colleen even made this joke at the end where it's like, Nightwing has a nice ring to it. I was like, are they making this? Is that a DC joke? Maybe. I don't know. Like, it's, Nightwing? I don't know if that was what that was supposed to be. I feel like that was, but maybe that was just me reading too much into it. But nevertheless, big surprise was the fact is Danny wanting to give Colleen the Iron Fist. Like, Missy was like, yeah, Danny will do good with the Iron Fist, sure, but you could do great things with it. But Colleen initially was like, no, that's your destiny, that's what you're all about. But Danny's like, who I was with the Iron Fist, I can't be that person anymore, because like the Iron Fist consumes me. When he'd go into that room on, like, use the Iron Fist over and over again. Because he always went out to help the neighborhood, sure, but there was always a part of him that just wanted an excuse to constantly keep using the Iron Fist because it felt so good. It made him feel powerful. He kind of got swept up in the anger and the power and everything. It seems like it's very intoxicating. I think it's also in particular for those, someone like Davos who was constantly lusting after it his entire life. And you take someone like Danny who did it because he wanted to fill a hole in his heart. It's something because of the whole conversation him and Colleen had about thinking and not reacting. And for him, it's like becoming the Iron Fist was reactionary to him losing his family. His entire life had turned upside down all those years ago. So he reacted by becoming the Iron Fist. And, this whole fight, like, everything he's doing right now, what he's standing for right now, isn't about Colleen. It isn't about Davos. It isn't about following Matt's mission, which is a nice thing that he kind of brings up, or protecting the city. It's about being the Iron Fist. It's like, no matter, even after all this situation, he still feels that pull. He feels the kind of lust for it. So for him, it was like, I need to make sure I put it in, like, I can't be the Iron Fist anymore, so he gives it to Colleen, which I do appreciate. The fact is that it does represent, I guess that's kind of an embodiment of the fact is everyone's got different chi flowing through their body and kind of what their chi looks like Davos's is like red, Danny's is yellow, but then Colleen's is white, which kind of fits her. I wasn't expecting her to get an Iron Fist. I wonder, is that like typical to her character in the comic books or not, or is that something they did specifically for the show? Either way, that's pretty tight, especially later on because we see at the end. Because this is the first instance they've really shown this, is the whole like aspect of like, because at first I thought the furthest we were going to go with this is the whole dual fisting, because Davos got that immediately, especially that moment against Walker, and he activates the Iron Fist and she grabs it, but then he activates the other one. I was like, that's pretty badass, because even Danny hadn't gotten to that point at that time, which I guess does show you that Davos does have some better control over the Iron Fist than Danny did. But to be fair, we also saw that Danny had a lot more control too, because he was using it and summoning it a lot more. Because remember, there's a lot more issue. Because when you think about it, like he had to take a lot more breaks in season 1. Because he had more limitations on it. And I think that's kind of a little subtle thing. I think it's kind of nice, kind of slowly building that up. Because it's something I brought up, because like, I don't really know if it 100% has limitations like in the comic books. I know in the Ultimate Spider-Man cartoon, I don't think it really did, because he kind of kept it active all the time. He didn't have to like stop and use it, like even like constantly throughout the fight, he'd keep it activated, you know? So, but it doesn't necessarily work like that in the TV show. Like it takes chi to use and concentration, so it's not like a 24/7 thing for anybody. Everyone kind of has to focus their chi to do it and stuff like that. So, but it doesn't seem like it's just double fist. It's also about channeling it through weapons, which seems like something they could potentially build upon in the future, because you see Colleen kind of do it for sword. Also, Danny's pretty handy with a sword, because he was fighting Walker without one nearing in the last episode of the season, and kind of handled himself pretty well. But to be fair, it's like Cumberland probably definitely trained them to kind of handle themselves in any situation. You know, it's kind of interesting too, because Danny brings up a point I thought was kind of interesting, was like the whole Cumberland kind of being like a cycle. You know, because having the Iron Fist would have just made him fit in that cycle, because it's like that's all they did. Everyone fought to become the next one chosen by the Iron Fist. That's all that was, you know? Which, like I said, that really shocked me that he gave it to Colleen, because I was like, are we going to circle back to him, like not taking that back, or is that going to pop up at some point in time? Which, obviously, skipping around and stuff like that, but as we see at the end, he gets it, and he has both of them, so I'm guessing at some point, the Iron Fist just naturally returns to him, because I think even if you get rid of it, like he ended up saying it himself, it wasn't gone. What he said was the connection was dark. I guess at some point he relit the connection. So Davos has lost it, but maybe Davos hasn't completely lost it. Maybe at some point in time during that confrontation with Davos initially, part of it went to Danny. But if part of it went to Danny, it wouldn't, Colleen would still be in that her and Davos would be constantly in that state of dying, or at the very least, Colleen would have still been in that state. So I'm thinking like it's just no matter what happens, the Iron Fist is his. It does belong to him. He is the right bearer of it. Hence why it came back to him later on. And like I said, it also seems that he's charging that through guns, which is interesting because you wouldn't expect to see the Iron Fist using guns. But that's more so for the purposes of like, I guess in those exact circumstances, maybe there are moments he needs the guns and supercharge them with chi and stuff like that. So when it's all said and done at the end, though, it's kind of interesting about the whole Joy and Ward thing. It seems like they haven't 100% worked on their family issues. They're kind of there, but it's still going to be a while because it still has to be on Joy's time for things to kind of go down and happen the way they need to happen. Like I said, kind of going back to it, it's kind of interesting to me that even when the time came, he was like, but why go after Danny? Like, he was very defensive of Danny. Like I said, that brother relationship, I really like that. But, to be fair, even after all these circumstances, Joy's kind of caught in the middle of it because she just wanted to be left alone. She tried to get away from Davos because she had a feeling like, oh, Davos might try and kill me. I mean, he literally did try and kill her. He pushed her off the edge of that ledge. I mean, she didn't die, luckily. But, Mary's not out of her life yet because it's like, oh, we're going to work together. She's like, don't I get a say in it? She's like, that's what I love most about you, Joy, is your sense of humor. So, yay. And she's kind of stuck handling that situation on her own. I thought it was kind of interesting, that whole, solar cell storyline. I thought that was going to have something to do with what Davos was up to. It's like, no, legitimately, she's helping Davos do what he needs to do, but at the same time, she was just having a business. She wanted something of her own, something that wasn't connected to Rand Industries, that wasn't connected to war, wasn't connected to her being a Meacham. It's just she wanted to kind of do something as her own, as Joy. So I was like, oh, that's kind of interesting. And it's something Colleen kind of brought up, and I think kind of fit very nicely about everything when it comes to this season. There are consequences for everything. Like doing what Danny and Colleen did, like kind of changed their relationship. Like you even saw it when they kissed. There was this weirdness and awkwardness to it. I think not just her being the Iron Fist, but everything that they kind of went through, the choices that Danny made, it kind of put a strain on their relationship. Like no matter what, they will always be bound together, but maybe things will never quite fit the same way that they did before, just because things are different now. I also like the fact is that Misty kind of brings it up that she isn't going to take the new job position as captain, because that was something she was kind of like bouncing around. But for her, it's like she doesn't want to be behind the desk because she likes being out there in the field and stuff like that. You can't see Misty just being. I mean, it makes you wonder when will they ever kind of get to where they are later on? Because obviously, like her and Colleen make a badass duo, but like how will they get to that? She even started suggesting that Colleen kind of become a cop. She has the instincts for it, but we see her kind of going a little more vigilante at the end. It only comes up like once. It happens sometimes here and there throughout the season, but more so like it happens a little at the beginning, but. During the parlay, Danny's got his face covered. I'm like, all right, of course, you'd want your face covered in a situation like this because the last thing you want is, it didn't come up that much, but it's like, oh, the last thing you want is billionaire heir to the throne, Danny Rand, kind of running around being superhero, caught around a lot of like, you know, triads, the Hachette men and the tigers. Like I said, it's so interesting because it's like, because obviously this all circles around because the vacuum that was left open by the hand. But interestingly enough, it's something I brought up too, like when I was talking about it, it's like, let's not forget Madame Gao is still alive, so she could easily rebuild the hand, so I don't know if she'll pop up in any shape or form like that. I mean, it might be something like in Daredevil Season 3, because, I mean, she has ties to that too. Which, once again, that's something I brought up too. I mean, technically, like, they said in Defenders that Stick was the last of his people, but the dude he talked to in season one of Daredevil, like in the episode he pops up in 7, the dude was like, will Matt Murdock be ready? He's like, I don't know. I'd assume that might turn into some Daredevil stuff. It started in Daredevil, so it'll probably end in Daredevil, but it's like, I feel like that'd probably be some Iron Fist stuff too. But to be fair, you know, that was about the hand. The hand's gone, but yeah, like I said, the gal's alive. Those fingers will probably have a way of growing back in some shape or form. Maybe not. I don't know. Especially because they made such a point to point out the fact is that Gal overheard Davos and Joy's plan. Kind of made me go, especially because we see she escapes Defender, so I'm kind of like, I don't know about that. We'll see. But I do love that when it was all said and done, Danny and Ward. I didn't see that coming. I was like, he's asking Ward to come along. I was like, oh, it's funny. Don't tease me like that. And it's like, no, that's why you're coming on. I'm like, what? Yes! Because it's like I said, it's interesting because Danny and Ward do have a lot in common because both of them are struggling with the dragon inside of them. Like, because Ward heard a lot of other people talk in his meetings, whether it be NA or AA, but the fact of the matter is, he never really listened until he heard Danny talk about what was going on with him because he didn't he didn't go through the exact circumstances, but he understood that dragon, that anger inside. And I think that kind of ended up what helped bring him and Danny so much closer together this season. So, like I said, beyond this, we'll see what his relationship is like with Joy going forward, but still. Kind of circling back to the Colleen's mom thing, I thought it was kind of interesting because there's that whole story, because you had that, like I said, that whole thing about her trying to track down Frank Choi the entire time, and it turns out, oh, he was a snitch and turned state evidence against the gangs and stuff like that. But then you have him telling a story about a princess and a farmer and a pirate king, and it turns out like that pirate king, the story that her mom had told her when she was a little girl, is what Frank had heard. So the person who gave her the box that started all of this was her mom, which is interesting because that means that her mom came to New York for what reason? Because for her, it's like, okay, so does that mean that my mom lied? Because her mom, like, she went to live with her grandparents because her mom supposedly died, but does that mean her mom's somewhere in New York? Or, you know, what was her reason for coming here? Because it also turns out Danny was like, because Danny kept pushing it. It's like, oh, what about this story? What if it's real? And she's like, who cares? It's just a stupid story, Danny. And she kind of snapped at him, but it's like later on Danny talks about when he sees the coin that was inside of it, and on the other side was the dragon symbol, the Iron Fist, and it's like, oh, like, he had heard that story from somewhere before, from Davos, who heard it in Kunlun, so that means someone in her ancestry, Wuaoshi, wasn't that the name? Was a pirate queen. So one of her ancestors was the first one to challenge the dragon. Meaning, I'd assume, which I'm pretty sure that's interpreting like someone in Colleen's family was the first Iron Fist. So her connection in all this, her being an Iron Fist, might be in her blood and destiny too. Her and Danny meeting might not have been an accident. There would have been a lot more to this. So he's got to go out to try and find out like more about the Iron Fist, find out what his place is in all of this. There was that dude he's meeting, trying to track down him and Ward at the end. That Randall dude, so it seemed like it might be a significant name since they went out of their way to kind of set that all up. So I'm curious to find out what that ends up being. Do you know at the time I'm recording this, like it just came out today/yesterday because like it's like 1 o'clock in the morning when I'm recording this. So I don't know if this is coming back for a third season. I'd really hope so because I'd love to see what they do with it. Like I said, it's something I meant to bring up earlier, but I kind of slipped away. It's like, what about the whole Misty and Colleen thing, the Daughters of Dragon? We got a little bit, I mean, we got quite a bit of that this season, but are they going to make that more of like a more official thing? And what about Luke and Danny, like the whole Heroes for Hire thing, especially where they all stand because Luke's doing his own thing, as we saw at the end of season 2 of Luke Cage, and then Danny's kind of off on his own adventure with Ward right now. So it does make you wonder, like how how those duos are going to like become a more permanent thing or not. I'd expect because of this situation, we might see more of Colleen and Luke Cage in the future potentially, because now that she has the Iron Fist and Misty made a note of like, oh, she doesn't like who Luke's becoming this day. Like, she could really put a dent in him now that she has that ability, so. But I'm so curious to find out what this is all about. Like I said, it was a lot of setup about the future, and I think that's the biggest thing about going forward would be about Colleen's heritage, like her family. Like, it was something that wasn't even brought up at all in season 1. Is a part of season 2's storyline, but I feel like it'd be a much bigger thing going forward because they'll probably end up bringing Colleen and Danny back together. So I'm very interested to kind of dive more into the history of this whole Iron Fist thing. We got a little bit of Kunlun. It just seems like more so just like the connections between them, like Davos's connection and Danny's connection, and beyond that, it's like it feels like we don't really dive too much into it beyond that. But maybe that's just me. So. Personally, I feel like the next thing we'll probably see would be season 3 of Daredevil. I don't know if that's something, I haven't really looked into it too much, but I don't know if that's something that's planned for this year or not. But, with the chronological order, I'd assume that. So I'd be interested to see, whether anything going down in this would affect that going forward. Also, something I wanted to comment on, really quickly, because I just remember, because I feel like I have to add this in there. What's up with the whole Misty and Ward thing this season? The kind of flirtiness back and forth, especially when they first met, the whole Maserati arm and everything, and just like, And then you have Colleen be like, ew, really? It's like, yeah, I try to give him a benefit of the doubt because, Danny's cool with him and everything, but still. And then later on, like, Misty being like, oh, yeah, he is all right. He is fine. And she's just like, really? I just love that. And it does seem like she's like, oh, when she thanks him later on, it's like, thank you, Mr. Meacham. And he's like, Ward. I'm like, yo, if nothing happens between you and Bethany, which it turns out they're not going to be, which is that's kind of another thing. I do like it, that, like I said, he is growing and changing, because there was that whole aspect of like him not really liking himself or really even knowing who he is, because he's kind of lost all his family. But he is, like I said, taking those steps forward to kind of figure out who he is. Like, it's an even more reason why him and Danny are going to, gel so well together. So I'm wondering, will we ever get to see anything in between those months they were gone? Probably not. That's probably just kind of like, it's fallen to the wayside. It's just kind of like some stuff went down. Know that they've been through quite a lot. Danny's back with the double Iron Fist. So, but really, that's all I want to talk about in this episode. Till the next time we meet, be happy, be safe, live life to the fullest, and enjoy it. Good day and goodbye.